Sarah is an international student, a campaigner at SOAS University of London. She was arrested in January 2024 and charged in March of this year under Section 12 of the Terrorism Act for supporting the right of the Palestinians to resist their occupiers, to resist the genocide. You can learn more about her case by following her campaign page called Defend the SOAS 2, which you'll find on Instagram if you're active there, and on other social media platforms. You may have seen her on our social media, on Cage social media pages. We published a video of her telling her story, and you'll be able to hear from her firsthand today in full as to what her experiences were when it came down to repression of Palestinian activists in the student scene. So, Sarah, please.
Thank you for having me. Brothers and sisters, comrades and friends, my name is Sarah, as been said. I'm a supporter of Fight Racism, Fight Imperialism, and I'm a student at SOAS University of London. Indeed, on the 4th of March of this year, I was charged under Section 12 of the Terrorism Act. I got my badge. My alleged crime is to have made a speech on behalf of the SOAS Fight Racism, Fight Imperialism Society, in which I supported the internationally recognized right of the Palestinians to armed resistance against the Israeli occupation. Another one of my comrades, a young student like myself, was arrested the same day I was charged under this same act for a similar alleged offense. They were arrested while supporting me at the police station as I entered my bail in a trap laid by the police to catch my comrade right at their doorstep. They've not been charged yet, they're still on police bail, but that's how we became the SOAS 2. This all came after my arrest over a year ago now, in January 2024, in which 7 police officers showed up at my flat, a dawn raid, following my doxing by Twitter Zionists, itching to see young people protesting for Palestine repressed and criminalized. Since then, I've been on bail with conditions limiting my ability to leave the country. As been said, I'm an international student. I don't have any family in the UK, and I've not been able to see them very much since I've been arrested. I've had 3 hearings since I was charged, the latest being Friday the 4th of July, coincidentally the same day the prescription of Palestine Action came into effect. The SOAS 2 Defense Campaign is organizing a meeting this Saturday to start building a united campaign on state repression, and on the 24th of October, I will be back in court for my next hearing. I urge you all to be there. I urge you all to support, defend our juries, because it's not just a matter of a few individuals speaking up about their experiences of repression or about the work that they're doing. This has to be a united movement which gathers the largest amount of people possible, because that's where our strength lies. But it's clear, right, why repression is happening. We don't have to go very far. The British state wants to break support for Palestine by any means possible. It wants to divide, it wants to demobilize, it wants to criminalize, and it wants to silence. The imperialist British state is first and foremost concerned about protecting its interests, which lie in the continued existence of Israel and the terror it imposes on the Palestinian people. The need to protect profits, to protect capital, always comes first under the capitalist system before the need to protect lives. Despite the tens of thousands of Palestinians that the Israeli state has massacred, the slaughter of over 20,000 children, despite the displacement of millions, the British state, the Labour government, wants us to believe that the real criminals are those standing up against this savagery and not those sitting in government abetting it. Even now, despite Israel's clear and open resumption of the genocide of the Palestinians, despite its clear intentions to set up concentration camps in Rafah, this Labour government has whitewashed the daily Israeli war crimes, pointedly rejected any characterization of the Israeli campaign as a genocide, and completely refused to take anything more than the narrowest of stances against it. And universities, of course, have not escaped this logic and are deeply complicit in British support for Zionism. My university, SOAS, you might know, markets itself as a left-wing decolonial institution, and that's probably why I decided to go there. But yet it continues to invest upwards of £6 million in companies either directly or indirectly involved in the genocide of the Palestinians. And it maintains a banking contract with Barclays, which itself has tens of millions of pounds invested in weapons companies. It has also taken significant disciplinary action against student activists, removing 2 students from their elected roles as sabbatical officers, suspending other students, and banning alumni from campus, often without following its own internal procedural deadlines for disciplinary action. So students may have a suspension that goes on for ages and ages and ages without the actual hearings in place for them to appeal their case. Our comrade Haya, this is still working. Our comrade Haya will be in another disciplinary hearing on Wednesday, 23rd of July, and will be outside of SOAS to support her that day. We'll make it clear to the SOAS management that we don't agree with this decision. The universities should be a place for freedom of expression, freedom of thought, especially SOAS, which has benefited actually from the work of left-wing scholars, which has benefited from its image as a left-wing, decolonial, even pro-Palestine institution. But most egregious of all at SOAS is the injunction imposed on protests at SOAS. So in practical terms, that has meant that all protests need to be approved in advance, and all protests organized by the encampment, the liberated zone at SOAS, is completely banned. New protest policy also prohibits the naming and targeting of specific individuals in protest, such as the director, Adam Habib, who is infamous for his racism, for his treatment of students in South Africa, calling the police on student protesters in South Africa. He was brought in at SOAS to deal with student protesters. That's what he's done, and now we can't even utter his name on campus in a disapproving way. And throughout my case, obviously, SOAS has been kind enough to not suspend me, but they've also not deigned to support me either. But we find that the situation is actually quite similar in universities across Britain, where we expect to find freedom of thought, of expression, and of protest. We instead find that it is decisions of trustees and management which are law. We find that students are no longer students, and instead they're clients or customers of the university. But it is the responsibility of students, ultimately, to challenge their university management for their support for Zionism. Because without students, there is no university. There is no money to be made. There are no fees going to line the pockets of management, of the trustees, of whoever else is working in the administration. Going back to my case, if I'm convicted, it would have serious implications for the movement in support of Palestine here in Britain. It would mean that anyone who expresses support for the Palestinians' right to resist could be tried under the Terrorism Act, without even having to mention any specific event, without having to mention any specific organization. We simply cannot afford to let ourselves be silenced and criminalized passively. We must defend the right to defend Palestine. This means supporting all those arrested and all those charged as part of this government's crackdown on principled support of the Palestinian people. The Terrorism Act is not just being misused, it is a draconian piece of legislation meant to give counter-terror police total powers over those arrested under it, without any accountability. We have to be clear here that it's a matter of design. The Terrorism Act was designed to do exactly these things. No comment responses to an interview under Section 7 of the Terrorism Act, as was said before, are themselves illegal, as a succession of journalists detained under its provision at airports have discovered. Introduced in December 1974 by the then Labour government as part of its drive to criminalise Irish liberation struggles and to suppress any expression of support by the Irish working class in Britain, terrorism legislation has constantly been extended by both Labour and Tory governments. The right to resist occupation by whatever means available is a basic right afforded to all oppressed peoples. This right is explicitly enshrined in international law, specifically the United Nations General Assembly Resolution 3743 and the Geneva Convention's Protocol 1. It is those who successfully fought their struggles against colonialism and imperialism who won this right, a right recognized internationally by nations which have stood steadfastly with the people of Palestine. It would be unthinkable today to condemn those who rose up against their colonial oppressors, whether they be in Algeria, in Haiti, in Kenya, in Vietnam, and everywhere else where struggles were victorious. The British state is violating these fundamental principles of international law by attempting to prosecute me. The designation of resistance as terrorism is a clear attempt to politically delegitimize the Palestinian struggle as a whole and to justify the indiscriminate killing of the Palestinians. The Palestinians are not simply victims, they are the protagonists in their struggle for freedom. And as anti-imperialists, our role is to uphold their right to self-determination. It's clear that the only way for us to fight back against arrests and charges and being put on remand or being put away to prison, period, is to organize ourselves. We must not accept even the slightest attempt to criminalize expressions of dissent. Concretely, this means protesting outside of police stations when comrades are arrested, outside of courthouses when they are put on trial, outside of prisons when they're put on remand or sentence, and when groups get prescribed, challenging those prescriptions, when new policing powers come into vigor, challenging those new policing powers. It is so obvious to us that the justice system is far from politically neutral, that it is a tool of the domination of the ruling class. Each hearing I've had, there's been this whole procedural farce. The lawyers and the judges are wearing wigs. It's all a masquerade to hide the fact that the reality here is that the British state is attempting to silence people standing up against the senseless murder of women, children, and innocent men. So that's why our defense when in the courtroom must be political in the same way that our prosecutions are political. We can't pretend to act on common ground and to be able to find some agreement with the people who are trying to destroy us. We must not accept any attempts to compromise. And we find actually that in many of these politically motivated cases, a political defense is a successful one. Our solidarity must also extend to all political prisoners, including all of the Palestine Action and climate activists currently held in British jails, that includes the Filton 18, all of the detainees in prisons across Europe and North America, and all of the Palestinian men, women, and children put behind bars simply for being Palestinians. And I have to bring up here the announcement today of the release of Lebanese freedom fighter and communist George Abdallah. After 41 years of imprisonment, it was announced today that Abdallah is going to be released on the 25th of July, after being the longest held political prisoner in Europe. So this is a victory for us to claim. We know that we can win. I mean, I want us all to clap for this because this is massive news. We have to claim every single one of those victories and not, think that was just merely an accident or coincidence. It is the product of our resistance. It is the product of our hard work as a movement. We know that there's not many of them. They're few and far between. But when we have them, we must claim them and we must celebrate ourselves. I'm going to end here and say that I'm going to have a quote actually by Hassan Kanafani, which is that imperialism has laid its body over the world, the head in Eastern Asia, the heart in the Middle East, its arteries reaching Africa and Latin America. Wherever you strike it, you damage it, and you serve the world revolution. By fighting against British imperialism and for Palestinian liberation, we're bringing forward the struggle for our own liberation. The repression we are experiencing is a clear sign of fear from the ruling class. They are afraid of what will happen to them if they were to lose their grasp over the masses. They are afraid of what will happen when their tools are turned against them, of being put in a dock in a people's court. So as this repression intensifies, it becomes even more important for us to stay steadfast, as it is the final resistance before freedom is won. Thank you.